We're here today with Galen Hare of Insurance Claim HQ, discussing issues Florida policyholders are running into with Hurricane Ian claims. Galen, UPC is ghosting policyholders and public adjusters. So what should the homeowner do if they have yet to receive any sort of engagement on their claim?
Yeah, so that's exactly what we're seeing with UPC and honestly a couple of other carriers as well, is they're just not responding. It doesn't matter. You got a lawyer, you got a public adjuster, you're handling it yourself, you've got a contractor who's helping you. They're just not responding. They're ignoring everything. And honestly, kind of end of December, early January after the storm, we're really at the point where we need to file civil remedy notices.
Now, what is a civil remedy notice?
Yeah, so a civil remedy notice is unique to the state of Florida, and it's something that you file with the state. The carrier does get notification once you do it, and you have to lay out, it's a little more complicated than it sounds, because you have to lay out what the carrier did or didn't do, and you have to cite to your actual policy and point out the provisions that they violated. You put all that together, and then usually a lawyer will file it, but whoever it is, you sign it electronically and you submit it, and then the carrier gets notification of that. The idea is they're supposed to then be prompted to action to cure those defects.
What happens if they don't?
So if they don't, under Florida law, and gets a little complicated here because we just had a change in the law, but that should not affect Hurricane Ian claims. So under the old law that applies to Hurricane Ian claims, then you would be in a position where you would be able to pursue potentially even bad faith, but also attorney fees, which would help offset the cost of having to hire a lawyer to actually go after your claim in the first place.
What does it cost someone up front to hire you guys to file their civil remedy notice?
So for us and for pretty much any lawyer that really is experienced in this area, they usually are going to charge you nothing to do a civil remedy notice. It's a required step. It's an important step. It has to be done right. And for us at least, and I think really any law firm that really works in this stuff, they know that that's an important thing that has to get done. So they'll do that free of charge with the understanding that if the carrier does not step up and make things right and you end up having to file suit or pursue it further, that you'll work with us or whichever law firm files it for you.
If a homeowner does end up having to file suit, how much can they expect to come out of pocket for that?
So with our firm at least, they should expect to come out of pocket nothing. Most law firms that do this work will front all of the costs, meaning if we have to pay the state to file that lawsuit, we will pay that out of our pocket. If we have to hire someone to come in and look at something, we again will front those costs. Even if you get further down the road, there might be like depositions and things like that. But any law firm that really does this work should be fronting those costs. And then again, if for some reason the claim doesn't work out, that law firm will just eat those costs. They won't come back to you. So in a perfect world, and at least for people that work with us, they should not be coming out of pocket in order to pursue their claim.
If a homeowner already has a contractor, but the insurance company is telling them that they have to get 3 bids, are they required to do so?
No. That is a misconception, and it's one of the things the carriers have been pushing really hard in this storm. They're kind of using like the old like auto body method. Like, I don't know, the first accident I ever got in, I was like 16 years old. First thing, they're like, go to 3 body shops and get 3 quotes. And then of course, they just picked the lowest number and said, we'll give you that money, figure it out, right? That's not the way your house works. Like, you should not be stuck with whoever the lowest dollar contractor is or otherwise have to come out of pocket to find a good contractor. You do have to cooperate with them. So like if they want to send people to give bids, you need to let them come. But it is not your responsibility to go through the phone book and find 3 different contractors, collect 3 different bids. If you have a contractor that you like or you have someone you trust that has done an estimate for you, you do not need to keep hunting around just because your carrier is asking you to.
If a homeowner's roof leaked during or after the storm and they were unable to get approval for emergency repairs, is it too late for them to do so now?
It's never too late, and we're seeing this a lot. Unfortunately, a lot of these insurance companies, they were either overwhelmed or they were ignoring people right after the storm. And it was hard enough to get a mitigation contractor to come to your house anyway, right? And a lot of these people didn't want to be spending thousands and thousands of dollars out of pocket hoping that they would one day get reimbursed. So unfortunately now, we have all these people that did not do what we call mitigate. And the first thing the carrier is ready to point out is that you have an obligation to. But it's never too late. There may be things that it's too late to do now. So for instance, the water may be dried up. So you're not going to bring a bunch of fans and extract water from things, right? But if that water has started to form like microbial growth or something, we need to get that stuff ripped out. We need to get that taken out. So it's never too late to address the damage that's been done. And I would say if you're sitting there now and now your insurance company is finally talking to you, that's something you really need to look at. I mean, it's not going to get better, right? The damage is only going to get worse. You just dealt with the holidays with a messed up house. Like, last thing you want is this stuff to continue to get worse through the rest of the winter and the spring.
So my policy has a mold cap. Is there a way that my insurance policy will still fix that water damage?
So there is still a way, and I'm really glad you asked that because everyone's dealing with that right now. They're starting to hear, well, you have a $5,000 mold limit, so that's all we'll give you. But the insurance company waited 4 months to address the issue, so of course it's gotten worse. And in Florida law, one of the things you're going to have to look at, so you're going to need to do this with your public adjuster or with an attorney, you're probably not going to be able to do it yourself, is you're going to need to look at why does that mold exist in the first place? How did that mold get there? Did it get there because the wind lifted up the shingles and the water came in? Well, that's not really what a mold cap was designed to deal with. A mold cap was designed to deal with when the loss itself was mold, so they ended up having to replace the whole house. This is really wind. This is wind and water. It's not really mold.
So I have a tile roof and my roofer says that the tile is discontinued, but my insurance company is wanting to pay for a repair. So how do I repair my roof if the tile is not available?
So you probably don't, is the first part of the answer. You probably need to replace that roof. And it's really important to remember that the people making these decisions for you, for your claim, they sit behind a desk all day. They haven't been on your roof probably. They're not used to buying these tiles. They're not used to doing these things. It sounds really easy to say, oh, just go to a boneyard, which is a place where they have old shingles just sitting around. Just go buy some old tiles and put them up there. Well, those might be too brittle. They might not go on. Or, oh, this same manufacturer makes something that's almost the exact same, but not quite. Those probably won't fit. And that's one of the reasons, like if your roofer told you it's discontinued, you probably have a roofer that knows a lot about the products they're using. So you probably should A, stick with that roofer. And B, you really should make sure you have a good lawyer, a good public adjuster involved because they're going to need to show those things. Like we'll even send videos in showing that you cannot take a new tile because the dimensions are slightly different and the shape is slightly different and just jam it in there and hope that it's going to get water to keep water from coming in. It doesn't work. So you probably do need to replace that roof, but it's really important not to take what they say at face value and do that exploration yourself. They will just say things that aren't true. They will tell you, oh, even though it's discontinued, there's a place nearby that has a bunch of them. They're probably in terrible shape and they probably been stored badly. Or they'll tell you, well, we can get you something very, very similar, but that color might look terrible and it just might not fit the right way. So you really have to have people on your side that are going to do all that exploration for you so they can get you that new roof that you're probably entitled to.
So one of the things that I'm seeing in the Facebook groups and some of the women in a meeting I was in the other day had told me was, hey, I got $7,500 to replace my roof from my insurance company. So how do I find a roofer that's going to do the work for $7,500?
Yeah, so one of two things is going on. Either they've got this like just massive deductible, which probably not much we can do about it, or more likely, they're probably severely underpricing the labor and the materials. That is something that you can work with. That is something that a really good PA or a really good lawyer will be able to help you get more money for. Either way, even if it's a deductible problem, they'll see that pretty much right away and tell you this is where it's at, right? Some of these hurricane deductibles are huge. I talked to someone the other day who had a $320,000 deductible. Oh, wow. Well, if the only thing wrong is his roof, he might only get $7,000 for that roof, right? It was just a house. But it's more likely that his deductible, using someone else, that their deductible is reasonable. Maybe they will come out of pocket for that deductible. They should. Mm-hmm. But they probably also underpriced the roof, which is why that lady only got $7,500. Maybe she should have gotten 30, 40, 50, 60. It depends on what the roof is. They should absolutely come out of pocket their deductible. But what we're seeing everywhere is underpriced labor and underpriced materials. The amount they pay you has to reflect what the market is charging.
So I have a friend who has wind damage and flood damage, and both insurance companies seem to be blaming all the damages on each other. So what does she do in that situation?
So this really first happened during Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans back in 2005, 2006. Is the first time we'd ever really seen this. And what happened, a really big insurance company, I'll let them stay anonymous, they showed up and their CEO is literally looking around at all these houses in New Orleans and says, what if we blame it all on flood? if we blame it all on flood, we don't have to pay for it. The federal government does. And that was the first real flood versus wind fight. In fact, one carrier just settled a multi-million-dollar lawsuit with the federal government, where the federal government went after them for falsely blaming things on flood so they could get the federal government to reimburse them. So this is not new. This has happened for years. And there's only one thing you can do. You probably will not resolve that yourself because you just don't have that training. So you have to get someone that has that requisite training. Probably not a contractor. They might be able to help you a little bit, but they're looking at how to fix things. You probably need a public adjuster or a lawyer that's been doing this for a while who can see that. That damage looks different, right? Like flood is water that comes up from the ground. And wind, that water is going to come in from the side, it's going to come in from the top, never under the doors, never from the foundation. So even if everything's wet, it'll look different. It'll fundamentally look different. That flood water is rising. That water coming in from the top, it will eventually flood. It'll collect on the ground, but it's also streaking down the walls and doing things like that. So you can figure this out as long as you have a licensed professional that knows what they're doing, but you're going to have to separately document that damage. You're going to have to divide your flood damage from your wind damage, and you're going to have to pursue both claims at the same time.
So if someone's received a check that's lower than what they agree with, is it safe for them to go ahead and deposit that check?
Almost always. We always like to look at the check, make sure it doesn't say anything like full settlement or in full payment. Any kind of wonky, weird language. You'll find usually the memo doesn't say anything. Maybe it has the claim number or the policy number on it. You're fine to cash those checks. You're essentially just taking undisputed funds. That does not mean that you're agreeing with their number. If you see anything weird on a check, you should absolutely call a professional and say, hey, let me show you this language. Like, maybe I don't want to cash it, but almost always you can cash those checks with no consequences. And you should, because if the check waits too long and it goes stale, it can be a real pain to get those checks reissued.
Galen, thanks so much for visiting with us today and providing such helpful information for Florida policyholders.